Hello, and welcome to today's webcast. Governing Azure consumption does not have to be time-consuming or difficult, brought to you by the Insight Microsoft commercial team. I'm Blair Loveland, your Microsoft Readiness Specialist at Insight, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we begin, I did want to cover a few housekeeping items. This webcast is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. The webcast console you are looking at can be completely customized. You can resize or move any of the windows that you have open. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can click on the Q&A widget at the bottom and submit your questions. All questions from this webcast will be captured, and there will be a Q&A during the last few minutes of the presentation. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit the webcast help guide by clicking on the question mark icon below the presentation window. The help guide covers common technical issues. I would now like to turn over this presentation to our presenter today, Elliot Barrett. Elliot, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Blair. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to join me today as we talk about what I'll narrow into is Insight Cloud here for Azure, but largely speaking, what we're talking about today is the public cloud and the spend and waste and the management of that spend, and how we can create an optimal outcome for us just from an economic perspective. So I appreciate you taking the time. I'm looking forward to having the chance to present this information to you and then field any questions that you may have. Along those lines, as Blair was mentioning, the platform that we're using today does allow us to do Q&A. I do have the Q&A window in front of me. Feel free to ask any questions. I will try my best to answer those questions on the fly. If I can't, I will absolutely make sure to get to them at the end of the presentation. But certainly looking forward to answering when I can for you. Just a real quick background on myself for context. Today, I'm responsible for the Microsoft commercial business at Insight. That's largely speaking a huge swath of organizations. So organizations that typically have 6,000 seats and under fall within our purview. But of course, we're involved in many different conversations around Microsoft. And certainly what I'm talking about today can be, covering organizations of any size. I've been in the industry for over 25 years, for the vast majority of that time within the orbit of Microsoft, working for technology consulting firms. And frankly, today I'm just so pleased to be representing Insight. I've been with Insight via the PCM pedigree for over 3 years. And I really am proud to be able to talk to you today as the representative of the Insight business and the Microsoft commercial business. Just, final note in terms of backgrounds and networks, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect and, just be happy to continue the dialogue over LinkedIn. So let's jump into this a little bit. The, first thing I want to do is for those of you that may not be as familiar with Insight, just a bit of background. Insight is a Fortune 500 company, global. So today we're in over 20 countries around the world. There are 11,000 Insight teammates out there that I've got, which is remarkable and outstanding to be surrounded by so many talented, intelligent, committed, passionate people. If you look at this slide, it really distills the scope and substance of Insight into a Microsoft view. One of the things that, I want to highlight in looking at this is today's Insight provides solutions and services to our customers and our clients. We do it through 3 core solution areas, digital innovations, connected workforce, and our CDCT group, which is our data center team. All 3 of those groups, again, world-class organizations that are working with our clients to provide global solutions. As we look at that through a Microsoft prism, you can see the substance of these teams in terms of the number of consultants that we have that are focused on Microsoft and the kind of capabilities that they've got in terms of accolades, and the acknowledgement and recognition that we've gotten from Microsoft in terms of the work that has been performed through these solution areas with the Microsoft technologies. So, I say all this because, of course, we want to make sure that you understand the kind of investment and commitment that we have to our Microsoft partnership, which has, frankly, been there from the inception of Insight. One of the stats that's not in here, and I shouldn't say stats, but as much as accolade, is today in 2020, we are Microsoft's Partner of the Year. Earlier I mentioned that I've been around the Microsoft orbit for, 25 years, and that time, this is the first time in my career that I can put up that flag and say I'm part of the Partner of the Year for Microsoft, which is a tremendous honor and a tremendous accolade. It really does speak to the type of world-class capabilities and support that we're providing our customers. So, kind of to drill this down even further in terms of, hey, this is Insight, this is Microsoft, just a minute or two on our commitment to Azure and what that means in terms of our ability to deliver for our customers. Of course, today, when we talk about the public cloud and we talk about the spend associated with public cloud, certainly Azure is a big part of that discussion. And, for us, there's been a tremendous investment that we've made to becoming a globally recognized group, center of excellence as it relates to Azure. Not long ago, Microsoft established a credential that they call their Azure Expert MSP that they've only assigned or associated to a handful of companies throughout the world. We are fortunate enough to be one of those. And you can begin to see some of the kind of investments we've had to make to become an Azure MSP. And I know that these credentials, are important. At the same time, I know that sometimes you get into a conversation where you say, well, what does that mean from a customer perspective? So as I kind of have the slide open, I wanted to provide an example of that because, sometimes those details matter. As we go through this conversation, I'm going to talk about people, process, and technology, and, just sort of the dynamic that exists today within managing cloud consumption and cloud budget, and how, in the end, frequently any level of excellence tied to technology is tied to, do we as an organization have the investment in the people that we have, the processes that we've developed, and the technology that we use to, be excellent? And cloud consumption and the management and monitoring of cloud consumption is no exception. What does that mean, relative to this certificate, really ties a lot to the technology. And I'll kind of get into some granularity here. Today, some of you on this call may have subscribed or purchased Azure in what's called an enterprise agreement. And that would be very typical. The enterprise agreement was the, premier vehicle it has been the premier vehicle for Microsoft for many, many years. And only until recently, in the last couple of years, it was really the only option to acquire Azure. Today, Azure can be acquired in a licensing vehicle that's called CSP. And I'll talk about that again a bit further in this conversation. Of course, CSP gives us a lot of advantages, not the least of which is giving you the ability to pay for Azure as you use it on a consumption basis as opposed to upfront, which you would have done in an enterprise agreement. But today, one of the other things that CSP can provide you as you move from an EA into CSP is that it allows you to take advantage of what is now termed modern Azure. And one of the fundamental benefits of modern Azure is that Microsoft can make available to you what's called Azure Cost Manager. And Azure Cost Manager is one of those technologies that allows you to monitor and manage your spend within Azure. It's a very powerful platform that, of course, we leverage and we use for our customers' benefit and help our customers become excellent at it, and as well as, we work with them to monitor their own environments. But the reason I bring this up is that there's a particular technology that's used to help our customers move from an enterprise agreement into a CSP modern Azure environment. That is, there's a specific technology. And only Azure Expert MSPs have that technology available to them today. So, I'm pulling that forward because, Microsoft is very particular about making sure that this experience, moving their EA customers into a CSP Azure Cost Manager environment, is done by a very elite group of folks. And, we clearly are, qualified to do that. And that has been a motion that we've gotten very, very good at. So, again, I'm going to talk to some of the details here, but, really what I'm trying to connect the dots into is that with the investment in Microsoft, with the credentials that we have, come very clear benefits, not just in terms of our people and the process, but even the technology that allows us to become a global world-class leader as it relates to what is Azure. So, again, as I move forward, I'll make this the last slide in terms of pointing out where, our expertise lies. But, really what I'm trying to highlight here in this slide is that, Azure, of course, covers a lot of ground. And what we do here at Insight is ensure that our customers get the greatest return on their Microsoft investment in its totality. And, the thing with Microsoft is that it does cover such a large scope that it's very important that when you partner with an organization, that you partner with an organization that can reach into that platform, that portfolio, if you will, and connect the dots and make sure that you are getting the best return on your investment. And we're able to do that through those solution areas that I spoke to before and do it in a world-class way. And here you can see, again, some of the awards and our ability to be a world-class provider in areas such as security or the Internet of Things, as well as artificial intelligence. And, very quick case in point, if we connect the dots within artificial intelligence and Internet of Things and some of our very strong capabilities there that reside within our digital innovation group. One of the greater, more clear examples of our abilities here comes from a development, an actual application platform that we created in the outcome of Corona, which is what we call our connected platform for detection and prevention. It's an actual platform that leverages smart devices, think of smart sensors, temperature screening, surveillance cameras, and artificial intelligence to help ourselves, but also our customers, put themselves in a proactive stance as it relates to Corona for their offices and locations. And it is just a very clear example of how we're able to take our great levels of expertise in areas such as artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, Azure in its totality, and deliver world-class solutions that help our customers move forward. So, let's get into the topic at hand, which is controlling and optimizing the costs of the cloud. And I'll say that, today, when I talk about this, of course, I'm going to tailor this conversation to Azure. But, please know that this conversation can be applied to the public cloud in its totality. And when I say that, of course, I'm talking about platforms such as AWS and Google. Much of the same tenants, resources, capabilities we can apply to those platforms as well. So what does this mean? When we talk about the cloud spend, and we talk about the cost involved in the idea of waste. Let me submit some statistics here that I think are really pretty powerful. And the statistics here I've been using for a few months, and they're from Gartner, and they are very powerful. In 2020, you can clearly see some of the dollars involved in terms of the public cloud and its growth. And one thing that's very clear is that the public cloud was growing fast before COVID-19 and Corona, and it is actually growing faster since. And we can kind of understand how that's happening. For so many organizations, the Corona pandemic has created an environment where there were investments that needed to be made to support what we would call a distributed workforce. Individuals that were once working in offices are now working from home. That's the case for most of us. And in that regard, there was whole investments that were made in allowing those individuals to become productive from home. Much of that was investment in cloud-based technologies and think collaboration, of course, Think 365. Furthermore, there were many data centers that, were within specific private facilities that could no longer be supported, and there was a clear transition over to the cloud in order to mitigate the environment that was and is Corona right now. So, the cloud is continuing to grow. And as it grows, the one thing that also continues is this notion of waste. And I'll talk a little bit about, where this waste comes from and, how we're going to manage it and so forth. But, what I wanted to do was also kind of drill into a little bit more support in terms of the size and substance of cloud spend and waste. Largely because, I had that stat before, the Gartner stats, and I wanted to see was there anything that was more specific that, was more current. And I actually found something, and this is just a resource which I really want to kind of refer to because I was very impressed with this study done by Flexera, which is, for those of us that are in this industry and are familiar with software asset management as well as, cloud economic platforms. Flexera has clearly been a flag that's been out there for some time. And they sponsored, supported, executed a State of the Cloud report. Great data. So, if you're in the market for just getting more data around this, I highly encourage you to go to Flexera to see this report. Not being asked to promote that. Nobody's given me any sort of sponsorship check for that, but it's really something that's quite impressive. And you can see some of the stats here that relate to, cloud spending in the enterprise space, but of course the growth is coming from all levels of segments, not just the enterprise space. And again, further supporting the fact that COVID, is only causing a growth in public cloud spend. But one of the stats that really struck me is that, organizations are over budget for cloud spend on an average of 23%. And at the same time, even though they're overspending by 23%, they still expect their spend to increase by 47% next year. And, to me, that was just a very, very meaningful statistic, and one that I continue to see over and over again in terms of where the real pain point is. So, if you get into the conversation of where is this overspending, where is this waste coming from, of course, there are, many countless nuances to where these things happen and how they happen, but we find that we can distill them into a handful of buckets. And, what I'd like to do is just sort of submit these three larger buckets here for us, which, many of you on the call may be very familiar with. I know that, I'm in conversations every week with customers, and in some fashion or another, I find, I can really put their pain within these three areas. The first, you can see here is oversized workloads. And, the best way for me to sort of convey this is that there is this reality for many, many companies, many organizations that before they were in the cloud, they were on premise. So anybody that wasn't born in the cloud, right, they were on premise. And they needed to move or wanted to move into the cloud. And they had, whatever their workloads were, and they moved them over into the cloud. And they did it, and I don't want to use bad terminology, but they did it in a fairly blind fashion. They didn't use the various tools that are out there today to understand the best way to right-size workloads within the cloud. And in truth, that is a reality. The cloud is built on a fairly elaborate, SKU-based systems. There's a lot of different nuances. You can take a workload and you could put it into the cloud in any number of different configurations, but that doesn't mean all those configurations are going to be optimal. And, for those organizations that did that, they are absolutely spending more than they need to because they're running those workloads in misconfigurations and, in essence, paying a premium for how they're running those workloads. And again, I'm going to talk to you a bit about how we work with our customers to help them right-size that move so that, when they're in the cloud moving from on-premise, they're doing it and landing in an optimal fashion. Idle consumption, this is another scenario that we run into. And largely speaking, the best example that I always find myself talking about is, sort of take the idea of the test dev environment and imagine that you've got a team within your organization that decides to prop up a test dev environment, and they do the work, and they get to a place where they're comfortable with the outcome, and then they leave. But unfortunately, they leave the workload running, and as a result, there is consumption, and as a result, there's spend, but there's no real productive outcome from it. They don't need to be doing it anymore, and that happens all the time. And the best sort of real life example there is I'm in the room and I have my lights on so I can read my book, and then I leave the room and I don't turn off the lights. Very similar. There's the bill's going to show up at the end of the month regardless of whether I'm in that room or not. And then of course there's this notion of rogue consumption, and this is the idea that there are elements, teams, groups within an enterprise or an organization that props up a workload within a public cloud environment without communicating to the individuals that are responsible for the budget, responsible for the environment. And the folks responsible for that environment don't have the technology or awareness of this instance. And as a result, the bill shows up at the end of the period, and my gosh, it's higher than they expected. Where did this come from? And, there's the mystery unfolds. So, today when we are with our clients, those pain points lend us to conversations where they come to us and say, hey, we need help. need help help us identify where the workloads are. Because, we don't know where the workloads are. We don't have the tools, people, process, and technologies to do that. Help us establish the budgets tied to those workloads. Help us monitor, what's going on. And then help us proactively govern those workloads so that they do not go over budget. Those are, in some fashion or another, that's the conversation we have very frequently when it comes to the public cloud, when it comes to Azure. And so, that I want to really kind of narrow in on how we answer that question. And in answering that question, I think that there's really sort of two scenarios. And one is an assessment-based scenario, and one is an ongoing-based scenario. And I'll talk a bit about those, and then we'll kind of segue into how we help from a people, process, technology perspective a bit further. So, along those lines of an assessment, let's kind of go there first. So earlier I mentioned that we have a number of customers that have in the past moved from an on-premise environment into the cloud, or customers that come to us today and say, we have the intent to move over from on-premise into the cloud. Help us right-size this. And this has been a very, very important motion that, engagement structure process that we've been performing for a couple of years now. Typically speaking, we have our cloud economics team perform this function. And, it's funny, like our world is such a vernacular-based world. And, for the last 2 years, we've been calling it the cloud economics team. I think they may be calling themselves the cloud solutions team. So, nomenclature's changing, but, it doesn't matter. In the end, what we're doing through this team is we're helping our customers analyze and assess their existing on-premise environment, take the outcome from those assessments and apply, best practices and understanding of the cloud to right-size the configuration for them in the public cloud based on, what will be giving them the best return, both in terms of economics and performance and security and a whole bunch of different outcomes. And we use different tools to do this. I mean, of course, we have a team of experts that are part of this process, but, I want to make sure that I'm sort of articulating the tools that we use. One of those tools is Movair. Movair is a platform that was, best of class platform in the market. I want to say recently acquired by Microsoft, but gosh, it could have been a year ago now. So, over the year, Movair has now become Microsoft. And, it's a fantastic approach because, if you're seeking to move into an Azure environment, very frequently Microsoft will help fund this cloud economic assessment using the Movair tool. Movair tool is one in which, we are able to deploy it within your environment. It does run over a 2-3 week period. I want to say closer to 3 weeks instead of 2. And obviously, I think for most of us on the call, there's the clear recognition that the longer we run the tool, the more likely we are to uncover any anomalies, any behavior that's, beyond a snapshot of a day. Our environments run differently on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis, and the longer we run these tools, the more capable we are of really getting a complete snapshot of how your environment is going to run and what it's doing. So Movair gives us the ability to take the data that comes from that assessment and then look at Azure and understand how to configure that environment in a very optimal way within Azure. The other tool that we use is a tool called Block64, and that tool is we run a very quick snapshot there. That is actually done within a day. And of course, it has the disadvantage of not having an extended period of time that we get in a Movair engagement, but it does give us enough data to have a very pragmatic Azure fundamental conversation where we can take that snapshot and do what I'll call the 80-20, that we can cover a significant amount of the discussion with a small subset of data and really point our customers in the right direction as they want to move forward. So, different flavors, if you will, that can help. And of course, again, I don't want to be too myopic. We can do this with AWS. We can do this with Google. We can run this and really do a 3-cloud assessment and say, okay, given your environment, this would do best in Azure, this would do best in AWS, this would do best over here in Google, however you want to phrase it. So lots of different ways for us to approach this. So, that's one scenario, that on-premise to cloud-based scenario. The other is, gosh, I'm already in Azure. And, we're looking at our bill and we're saying that we don't think that it's ideal. We're pretty sure that there's waste here. And, for those customers, we can run an in-cloud assessment. So in essence, what we'll do here, and frankly, it's a very practical, pragmatic exercise. We're going to, leverage any data you may have. So we've run into customers that have data that they've been running. They are able to give us data from their own existing environments, and that's helpful, but we don't need it. That's just the start. But we'll also take your existing statement from Microsoft. We'll begin to do a very quick understanding of, where your business objectives are. And by understanding your existing footprint within Azure, we can begin to provide recommendations. And, you can see some of those recommendations there. And sometimes, they're pretty straightforward, in terms of, hey, you may be running something today that, we can move over into reserved instances. And in that regard, get you a really nice discount tied to your consumption. Just, a very easy low-hanging fruit kind of example. And this has been a really nice, very deliberate conversation that we've been in for many of our customers that does end up translating into real cost savings. So certainly something we want to do. Now, the transition here is saying, okay, look, there were two motions that we went through to help you get cost savings. One was an on-premise to cloud assessment. The other was, hey, I'm in the cloud. There's that motion where we can help you optimize your spend as you're in the cloud. The third area to talk through is simply how you acquire Azure today. And this is, Microsoft is evolving, as it always does, in a fairly deliberate way. Microsoft has been in this very deliberate march, transforming itself from an old, what I would call traditional volume licensing construct where, there's this enterprise agreement, and as a customer, you make upfront payments on an annual basis based on annual commitments that are based, again, on estimates and fairly inexact science in the past. And, that they're moving from that. Microsoft recognizes that our marketplace would rather not, pay up front. Would rather pay for what they spend on what they use. They want it to be a consumption utility-based model because, the truth is we have been in the cloud as individuals for some time now, and what we've all become very keenly aware of the fact that we don't have to pay up front for anything. We can pay on a subscription basis and we can pay on a consumption basis. So business should be no different. So Microsoft is moving in that direction. And today, that from an Azure perspective, that represents itself in the licensing vehicle that they call CSP. Here at Insight, we call this Insight Cloud Care because one of the neat things that CSP allows us to do is bundle in support services within the offering. So, in essence, what we're able to do through Insight Cloud Care is give our customers the opportunity to acquire Azure on a consumption basis. And as they acquire Azure on a consumption basis, do it at a very competitive rate. So you're not going to get a better price. I'll just say that there first. Let's get that off the table. We're going to be very competitive from a price perspective. But not only that, what we're able to do is bundle in support services as part of that acquisition. And those support services include access to Azure Cost Manager. So I mentioned that before, that tool, that platform that allows you and us to help monitor and manage your cloud spend on an ongoing basis. And by the way, I say Azure Cost Manager, but it doesn't always, it's not always Azure Cost Manager. We use other technologies and platforms as well so that, we can ensure that you're getting the best visibility to your cloud spend, to your cloud workloads, and, and really manage that on a proactive basis. And, I can talk about that a bit further. And I will, but just know that technology is available through this offering. And within that price point, that it's going to be very competitive. It's all bundled in there. In addition, you're going to get the 24/7 administrative support for Azure. That's all part of that purchase, all part of that subscription, if you will. And, you're getting assigned a cloud success manager. And again, I'll talk about these things, as part of what is Insight Cloud Care. So, I guess let me do that. I mentioned, this idea of a cloud success manager. So when you become an Insight Cloud Care customer and you're acquiring Azure through CSP, which again is important because now you're not paying up front for Azure for an annual basis. You're paying for what you use and the competitive price point. We also assign to you a cloud success manager. And this is an individual that is working every day with our public cloud customers, understands best practices. So that's, I always get caught up in this people, process, technology conversation, but I know it is really the secret sauce to excellence when it comes to business and when it comes to technology. And frequently, what I found is that, it's not that our customers don't have the people, the process, or technologies to be excellent. It's just that their investments are made in different places in different ways. We can't all invest in the same thing. At Insight, this is where our focus is. So we've made very strong investments in building a team of very qualified subject matter experts in the public cloud that are working with public cloud customers all the time, beginning to glean best practices in terms of workloads and configurations and, mapping what I'll call business process and business intent to technology. There's forgive the pun, there's insight there that these cloud success managers have. And, part of their role is to help our customers get onboarded into Azure, to help them set up Azure Cost Manager, to give them an overview of Azure Cost Manager so that it can be configured in a way that's going to help them monitor and manage their environment in a proactive way, kind of go back to those pain points that we heard earlier in the presentation. And then from then on, work on a month-by-month basis or in a rhythm. It doesn't have to be month-by-month. I'm aware of relationships that meet every 2 weeks and others that meet every quarter. It's building a regular rhythm for our customers to meet with our cloud success managers to reflect on their existing spend, reflect on their existing consumption, again, map back to their intentions, their budgets, as well as best practices, and make the iterations to help them continue to evolve. And again, all of this is built into your Azure CSP acquisition. So again, you're not spending any more than you would with any other, offering, and you're getting the benefit of a cloud success manager with the Azure Cost Manager technology and the processes that come with it. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about the technology. Earlier, I explained that we use Azure Cost Manager. I explained that we use other platforms. I will, sort of offer up other platforms. One of those other platforms is Hypergrid, as an example. And the truth is that I don't want to get sort of very focused on the technologies because, in any given month, another technology surfaces up as best of class. The reality of our world is that significant investments are being made, every day as it relates to the public cloud and the monitoring of the public cloud. And, we at Insight have a responsibility to find those best of class solutions and bring them forward in this offering. So we're going to continue to move those forward. Today, it's the platforms I mentioned before. And I will even say that we have other platforms for AWS and Google. I mean, it's a portfolio, if you will. But with all of that, our cloud success managers work with you to understand your workloads, put yourself in a position where you can monitor the workloads and, be able to monitor and identify them in the case of something like a rogue instance, where something gets propped up, you'll understand that it's there and you'll be able to work in a proactive fashion to govern it better. You'll be able to understand when, you find yourself in a test dev environment that's been walked away from, and then you can shut that down and save money. We can put budgets and assign budgets to various workloads. And then we can put you in a position where we can proactively throttle back that consumption when it begins to get above certain budgets. We can create notifications so that when you get certain thresholds, that there's alerts that are sent out to you or to members of your team alerting you that, gosh, this workload is getting to this level of consumption, be advised, right? And then there may be a remediation path that we work with you on. Lots of different ways for us to leverage this technology and put you in a position where you're recovering that excess spend. I mean, if we go back again to the earlier statistics and we see that, we on average 23% of the public cloud budget is going to be overage. If we pull that back on an enterprise that's spending on average $12 million, that means that there's about, $2 million and change that can be brought back into a budget and used somewhere else. Lots of different ways for us to think about how to leverage that capital better. So, again, one of the things that we also provide within Insight Cloud Care for Azure Essentials, which is that CSP Azure acquisition, vehicle, is you get, as part of it, 24/7 administrative technical support of Azure. All of that's built into this. So, there are many different facets of support that are tied up in this offering that, you can benefit from, putting yourself in a position where you're going from paying upfront for Azure to a place where you're paying on, consumption basis with these built-in support services that in turn help you govern your spend moving forward. So it's a very clear path to success. Okay, so beyond what I would call the acquisition motion of Azure, meaning, beyond the idea of, hey, I'm acquiring Azure on a consumption basis, I'm getting the people, process, and technologies to govern that spend better. There is the reality that a number of organizations simply do not have the bandwidth or expertise to manage Azure from a production functional perspective. How do they run and operate Azure on a month-by-month basis? And, some of the statistics here begin to speak to that, in terms of all the different things that are challenging in terms of managing public cloud. And, the reality that it may make sense to outsource the management of Azure. And there are lots of reasons to do this, and I've always found, and I've had countless conversations around managed services, that it's first acknowledging the fact that any given customer can become, excellent at what we're talking about. It's just a question of where they're making their investments. And frequently what I've found is that those investments are being made within the core competency of the business, and they need a partner that they can bring in to provide managed support around a part of their business that they're just frankly not putting their capital into. And they want to leverage an operating budget to support that. And that's when managed services make sense. And, then there's a question of, what kind of partner are you looking for? And of course, you're looking for one that can be a trusted partner, one that's going to be able to provide a multitude of services, and I would submit that, of course, at Insight, one of the clear benefits is, through our managed capabilities, we can pull in any given level of service expert, any given level of technology expert to support and complement whatever the conversation is at hand, in the sense that, technology is not singular. It's very involved, it's very integrated. And frequently when we run into challenges, it can end up spoken into other parts of the technology portfolio that may not be what initiated the conversation. So it's important to have a partner that can go beyond the silo of that service that we're talking about. And of course, we are able to do that because we've got our core solution areas that can be pulled in at any given point in time. So, when we talk about managed services, for us, the step up there is, just again, vernacular. When our customers begin to acquire Azure in CSP, they're in our Essentials tier of Insight Cloud Care. But when they choose to work with us in a more managed environment, where we're either helping them operate that environment or optimize that environment, there are steps up into our advanced tiers and our premier tiers, which you can obviously see on this slide here. And really, if we talk about these two slides, what we're talking about are very typical ITIL-based responsibilities and tasks, functions, if you will, tied to each of the workloads that are associated within your subscription, whether it's again advanced or premier. Premier being that step up into optimized as opposed to just straight operations, if you will. Getting into that a little bit further from a granularity perspective, you can begin to understand how this builds from an Essentials, kind of look to the right. Essentials is purely just support. When we move into advanced, we get into notification and security and patch management and resolution. And then when we move into Premier, then we get into optimization, which is really kind of stepping into the analysis, posture and working with our customers on a proactive basis so that we can continue to drive to, just again, a more, optimized outcome for their Azure experience. So that's a lot to say within 40 minutes. I have been keeping an eye on the Q&A, have not seen any questions, but certainly open, to any questions that may be out there. So I'll pause for a minute. Okay, don't hear any questions. But before as I sign off, just one last plug. If you want to continue to learn more about the cloud, I can offer you not an interactive, but another forum. I have the benefit of being a co-host on a podcast. Myself and Bob Agnew co-host Two Guys in the Cloud, which you can find by searching any of your podcast subscription platforms. Of course, iTunes is part of that, where, we continue to have this conversation around the public cloud and things like cost management and cost waste. And of course, there's many different topics on the cloud, and we would love to have you join us. So with all that, again, thank you very much for the time, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elliot. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out to ourselves or Elliot, especially about the new podcast. You can also reach out to us at msmarketing@insight.com. The reason I'm also throwing that out there is because we also have a webinar next week on Azure Sentinel and keeping your environment secure. So if you have not received an invite from your Insight account executive, please reach out to us at msmarketing@insight.com, and we will get you an invite, and so you can get registered and learn about that great, security technology, especially nowadays, that Microsoft and Insight can provide to you. And again, we also encourage you to sign up for the rest of Elliot's webinar series. We have them scheduled through the rest of the year, and we hope you all have a great rest of the day. And thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Elliot.